Jin-Woo turned his attention to the newly purchased weapon he had left embedded in the stone floor after massacring one of the mages. Without hesitation, he activated the first-level Ruler's Touch ability, an ability that required no mana but granted him the power to control objects. Without wasting precious time, he summoned the weapon to his hand and charged toward the remaining enemies in the dungeon. Reaching the next mage with deadly speed, Jin-Woo's blade tore through the target's body, disemboweling him with ease. A notification confirmed the kill as the mage dissolved into black smoke. Confidence radiated from Jin-Woo as he shouted with excitement that only 4 mages remained. However, he quickly realized that reaching them would not be simple. The mages were hiding behind knights who absorbed every strike meant for them. Nevertheless, Jin-Woo pressed forward with his new weapon, which made handling his attackers significantly easier. He noticed once again that his weapon had begun to dissolve into thin air, so he immediately used Ruler's Touch, stretching his hand out to stop it from vanishing completely. His hand, however, landed directly in front of a knight who failed to register Jin-Woo's rapid movement. In an instant, Jin-Woo clenched his hand into a fist and slammed it into the knight's head, shattering it with brutal force. Energized by the momentum, his eyes gleamed with deadly intent as he declared that he would slice every enemy in the room into pieces. Just as Jin-Woo had declared earlier that he could handle these talentless knights, he now towered over a heap of shattered monsters. Their broken bodies, twisted and crumpled, formed a grim mountain beneath his feet. He stood at the very top of the pile of fallen dungeon knights, his breath steady, his presence absolute. But the battle was far from over. The clang of steel still echoed in the distance. More of them were coming. The work was not yet done. There were still many left to be broken. Only one thing had slipped Jin-Woo's mind: his own safety. So focused was he on obliterating the enemies in front of him, he never noticed the danger closing in from behind. It struck fast and without warning, a blade plunging deep into his back. His body jerked violently, a growl tearing from his throat as the pain exploded through him. The blade shattered upon impact, fragments embedding themselves inside his flesh, but Jin-Woo didn't fall. His breathing grew ragged, blood seeping freely from the wound, but his legs refused to buckle. He endured as he always had, gritting his teeth through the agony. He wouldn't fall here, not now. How much longer? He roared, his voice echoing off the cold dungeon walls. Will you hide behind your puppets? No response came from the remaining mages, only their trembling fear. Irritated, Jin-Woo thrust his hand forward without hesitation, seizing one of the mages by the throat. The crushing grip mirrored his fury, and before the man could utter a spell or plea, Jin-Woo's dagger carved through flesh. Blood splattered his arm as the limp body sagged in his grip, lifeless. Tossing the corpse aside like garbage, Jin-Woo exhaled hard. 3 more, just 3 left, and he was done waiting. At one point, Jin-Woo noticed a faint purple glow emerging from beneath the immobilized corpses he had just slaughtered moments ago. Standing atop the mountain of monsters he had brought down with his own hands, he realized he was now on the back of something else, something that hadn't died. Beneath him, rising from the pile of dead bodies, stood a massive creature with a sword still lodged in its back. A golem of staggering size and power far superior to the combined might of the knights and mages he had just fought now loomed before him. Jin-Woo hadn't expected such a monster, not here, not now. Reacting instinctively, he leapt off its back and landed swiftly at a safe distance, dagger clutched tightly in his bandaged hand, unsure for a moment of how to deal with this hulking enemy. The golem was no ordinary stone creature. Its sheer strength and destructive capability tore through the stone floor, leaving behind a fractured terrain that was impossible to cross normally. Jin-Woo's eyes glowed with an ethereal blue light as he slipped into combat mode, his speed increasing enough to narrowly avoid the crushing blows. Then from the corner of his eye, he noticed a glow emanating from the mages nearby. It became clear to him they had sacrificed their entire battalion of knights and replaced them with this single devastating force. But Jin-Woo had no intention of dragging out a battle against a creature that would drain too much time, energy, and stamina. With a burst of supernatural speed and overwhelming strength, he decided to cut off the problem at its source. Launching himself toward the rear lines, he reached the mages in a flash and obliterated every one of them in a single devastating strike, removing the summoners who maintained the golem's presence, leaving only one final adversary behind. Gathering all his remaining strength, Jin-Woo brought the battle to a close by finishing off the last mage, disposing of him with a precise and powerful strike that ended the brutal fight in a swift, almost graceful display of speed. At that very instant, the enormous stone golem began to collapse before his eyes, settling heavily onto the ground before crumbling into fragments. As the massive stones tumbled down, they shattered parts of the dungeon around them, and with them fell the knights who had long been a persistent nuisance to Jin-Woo throughout the battle. Jin-Woo looked over the aftermath with a calm expression, exhaling in quiet relief as he remarked that if the mages hadn't gathered together in one place, it would have been much more difficult to take down the golem. His gaze then shifted to a timer, tracking the amount of time he had spent inside this dungeon. Afterward, a notification appeared stating that all monsters had been eliminated. Jin-Woo thought there would be no more alerts, but soon noticed a new message. He could now choose a class based on the number of points he had earned. Clutching his weapon, he realized the quest had concluded and he was about to be assigned a profession. Confidently, he assumed it would be assassin. Another notice, however, clarified that the profession would be granted at the end of the player's analysis, and apparently Jin-Woo wouldn't get to choose for himself. He began analyzing his own stats. Having invested heavily in strength and agility, he speculated that he could be assigned warrior due to his strength or assassin due to his agility. He also considered the possibility of becoming a tank thanks to his high stamina. It seemed clear that the class would fall into one of those categories, and Jin-Woo told himself he'd be satisfied with any of them, knowing that whatever he received, he would emerge much stronger. Then a strange set of notifications began to appear. One declared that wherever the player went, the Reaper would follow, and that the path he walked would be littered with corpses and soaked in blood. Jin-Woo wasn't quite sure what the alerts meant. Another message followed stating that someone was leaving nothing for their allies to do, capable of managing everything with their own strength, perhaps a warrior. But then came the next message saying that Jin-Woo would have an army of the dead under his command, forcing the entire world to follow his laws. Jin-Woo was stunned by what he had just read. A chill crept down his spine as unease settled in. The ominous mystery sent a shiver through him. His eyes widened in horror as he saw something ahead, and in disbelief he asked himself, was this really his profession?